Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this little guy right here. This is the CRKT Razel GT. So first off, I want to thank CRKT for sending this guy along. They said, Nick, hey, we got a bunch of stuff coming out. You interested in any of it? And I saw Razel and I said, yes, absolutely, 100%. So they did send this along. Nonetheless, we have to assume this is the very best quality controlled one of these guys ever, and I'm doing my best not to let that affect the nature or the quality of my review. Next thing, let's do some size comparison. Here it is against the Spyderco Delica, as always. So what we see here is this is... well, actually not all that huge. In terms of sharpened blade length, we are right in Delica, vicinity, right? So there's that. Here it is against the Ontario Rat number 2, which is on my desk someplace. And here it is against the Spyderco PM2. This is a River's Edge cutlery version, but they're my other one's wearing a fancy set of pants at the moment. So anyways, nonetheless, what we see here is this is not a particularly large knife. In terms of the handle size, we're very close to the Rat 2, and in terms of blade length as well. So at least sharpened length as well. So there you go. Next thing, let's do a quick discussion. Who the heck is John Graham? What is this design? What the heck is a Razel? So John Graham is a designer based out of, I want to say, Tennessee here in the U.S. But anyways, nice guy, and I've been a big fan of his work for a long time, and one of his sort of hallmark designs is the Razel form, which I gather is a portmanteau of the razor and your chisel, right? And so instead of just having a normal grind down on the bottom here, and we do, this is a sharpened edge, we also have a second sharpened edge along the very top of the blade here, allowing you to do kind of more chisel-y sort of work with it. Actually, I should throw it up against the ruler real quick just so you see that as well. We see we are under 3 inches, but this very top part here is also sharpened. This is also sharp. And this can actually be very, very nice and very, very useful. So there is that. And then finally, I'm going to do a quick review here because... well, we'll get there. But anyways, let's go into the good and the not so good about this particular knife. So on the good side, to start with, the ergos on this guy are actually quite fine. There are 2 actual different grips that you can take. One grips a little bit further back here, and then one you choke up and use this finger choil area and do that. And both of these actually work very well. They feel nice in the hand. The knife does fill the hand very well, being as wide and thick as it is. It's got pretty good ergonomics here. I gotta say that the clip is actually pretty well done ergonomically too. At least with my particular relatively small hands. This clip ramp doesn't end up stabbing me too uncomfortably, and it doesn't stab me too uncomfortably. Wow, that's not a sentence I thought I'd make, but there we are, right? So anyways, it doesn't stab me too uncomfortably. I'm comfortably stabbed, and so the ergos are good. Next thing, this is a little detail, but it is one I like seeing. The clip on this guy is actually both countersunk, so you can see that the clip goes down beneath the level of the scales, and we also see that the screws are recessed into the clip. That is a beautiful thing. I really appreciate that very much. It doesn't take too much to do it, but by God, so many people don't do it. And that makes this a true deep carry clip. Mind you, you still have a fair amount of... well, that whole thing sticking up above the top there, but that is a nice little detail. Next thing, the assist on this guy is relatively smooth, particularly on the close. This is running on bearings, and on the close, it feels like it distributes some of the tension over a larger area, right? So it is much more tractable, for instance, to close this guy one-handed. It doesn't have that same feeling of like nothing, to get it closed. So, that's good. And the action on this is very strong. This is an assisted knife, meaning that, I'll kind of pull the blade out here and show you, if I very slowly start to deploy the blade, separate the handle away, there's going to be a certain point at which the handle just takes off and the knife flies open. That's because there is a spring in there, and you'll see that if you watch the disassembly video. But it is assisted. It is a very strong assist, and it is borderline, frankly, loud. It is like snappy. It's like, boom! This is out of there, which means it will always be reliably opening, if that's really important to you. Next thing, this is a Razel blade. Like I said, the blade on this guy here is 8CR13 MOV, which we'll talk about later, but it has the Razel blade profile, where you have a grind here and the grind here, and you have a sharpened edge here and a sharpened edge here. This is actually a thing that is actually pretty nice, because not only do you get a tip for cutting, or for instance, if you're going into a box, you can just dip that little tip in there. That works just fine, but you can also use it for scraping style tasks. There are many occasions where it's just like for home improvement, a Razel style knife is actually a very nice thing to have around, because you can get up onto things, you can scrape things off. It is very, very nice in that way. And this particular blade, having both a flat Wharncliffe area as well as the little tiniest bit of belly, gives you a little bit more of an option, right? And so I do like the Razel blade, and I gotta say the knife on the whole is unique. And there are definitely gonna be people who are gonna be like, yeah, it is. It's kind of one of those unique for better or worse things, but it is the Graham Razel GT design, which I believe originally stood for Gentleman's Tactical. But nonetheless, it is a unique piece, and there aren't really other people making this blade shape, right? This is a John Graham thing, and so I love seeing them actually hit production. So to me, that's what's good here, is that the Razel design is a really good idea. It's a unique piece. The action is very, very strong off the assist. The assist is relatively smooth to close. The clip screws here are flush, and the ergos are good. On the bad side, to start with, I gotta be honest, this thing in the back here, this little impact thing area, this is a John Graham thing. It's not one that ever spoke to me. And it's done in such a way that it's not terrible to the hand, right? Because this back part is rounded, so it's not like digging directly into your palm, at least with my particular hand. But nonetheless, I feel like I would probably just kind of get that off of there with a belt sander or something like that. It's not something I'm particularly in love with, and unfortunately you do need to keep it in there in order to run the knife, because it does serve as your back spacer. So there is that. Next thing, the blade steel on this is 8CR 13 MOV. It's a steel that is adequate. Many people have used knives in 8CR13. It's adequate for certain uses. Let's just put it that way. It's a steel that you better love sharpening, because you're going to be doing a bunch of it, right? I mean, it's just getting harder and harder to sell 8CR at $50. I'm sorry, guys. And actually, that brings us to the next point, which is that it's at $50. Now, $50 is not a bad price, right? It is relatively budget friendly, but the thing is, if you look around at the other budget knives that are coming out for $50 lately, this just unfortunately doesn't feel like it keeps up well. There you're often seeing upgraded steels. You're seeing things, that are just higher end. You're seeing awesome manual actions where they're able to deploy reliably without using an assist at all. It's not that far behind, but it just does feel behind, right? $50 is getting you less here, accepting the design than you are getting for most companies for $50 these days. Next thing, handle finish on this guy is they've done some work to kind of texture it up here, but it is a little bit on the slippery side. This is kind of that class of aluminum, and it feels like it is aluminum here, that is a little bit slickery, right? And so this is not a great knife for the Vaseline factory, although it's worth noting that once you get into this grip here, you got the flipper tab in between, as well as this little bit of jimping up there, but I would like to see maybe a little more texture here, just to keep this from being as slippery. Next thing, this is a heavy knife. So I already showed you, we're just under 3 inches of blade here, and we are 4.25 ounces. Not exactly lightweight, and part of the reason for that is this is a very thick knife. Not only is the blade on this guy weirdly thick, leading to a very, very thick behind the edge Razel point up top here. Should point out very little distal taper just because of the way it was ground. That is narrowing towards the tip, but it is also very thick in the scales, partly to accommodate the assist spring that's underneath there, and just partly just generally. Like I said, ergonomically speaking, that can be nice, but nonetheless, it is a very thick knife in the pocket, and it feels like, especially the blade, boy, that could have been a little bit thinner, and the knife would have been a little nicer for it. Next thing, you're welcome to read this as my own bias, but I don't feel like this needed an assist. Some people love him, but I don't particularly, right? And part of the reason for that is, like, for instance, take this guy. This is the CRKT. This is another John Graham design. This is the Razel Cliff, a little tiny guy, and this is an unassisted manual knife. There is no spring in this at all. You pop it out, and it opens because it has a nice detent and a decent action, right? They got that right here without the assist, and here they didn't. And this adds some legal entanglements. There become areas that you can't ship these to or carry these in, and frankly, it just doesn't bring all that much to the table. Some people love the kabam kind of deployment thing, but to me, I don't freaking get it. So I don't feel like this needed an assist, but more importantly, having an assist is fine if it can be removed, right? If you could just take the spring out there and the knife would be a perfectly functional manual action, that's spectacular. Great. But I wish that they would have built the knife such that I had an easy choice, right? So I could very easily just take it apart, pop out that spring, and then have a great knife running on a manual action. I feel like that would be the best compromise here. The people who want the bazam assist can get it, and the rest of us who don't care for that can not. And so it makes me a little sad that you can't take out the assist here. So to me, that's what's bad here, is the assist can't be disabled. It didn't really need one to start with, in my estimation. It's a thick boy, it's heavy, the handle finish, little slippery. The price is not necessarily so great compared to the other. I mean, it's fine in isolation, but compared to the competition, this doesn't stand up for materials, construction, etc. And I'm just not a fan of the impact area here. Final conclusion, I gotta be honest, this one kind of left me a little bit cold, right? Because it does have some charms, right? It's got decent ergos, the flush clip screw, the strong action because of that assist right there, the Razel blade, and a very unique design. Those are things that I really hoped would be really coming out well. But the lanyard here is, well, the materials just aren't great. It makes the price look pretty weak compared to the competition. It is a little slippery, it is a little heavy, it is a little thick, and the assist, I feel like, wasn't super necessary and is not removable. Final conclusion, I gotta be honest with you, I'm a little frustrated here because this is a unique design by a very unique designer, right? John Graham is a guy who I would love to see more of his work out there in the wild, right? And CRKT has done his stuff a bunch of different times, offering this, what I think to be a pretty underrated kind of blade shape here. And I think it could be a very, very nice pocket knife. But the thing is, and after the Razel Cliff Compact, this little guy, with Cricut, by and large, did it very right, and they did it right at a very good price. I was kind of hoping that we were going to get a really nice sequel in a little bit of a larger size, but unfortunately, it feels like, I mean, it's still unique, don't get me wrong, but it feels like the accountants got a hold of it at some point in the process and gave it a price point that is kind of right exactly where it didn't need to be. And of course, you know, I don't know all of the intricacies here. There may be reasons why it needed to be here, but from my perspective, as a random jackass in the community, it feels like it got a price point that is too high to compete well for the materials and the approaches that it's using relative to some of the other budget makers. At $50, this really doesn't stand up too well to some of what's coming out from companies like Civivi, CJRB, that whole world. This doesn't really hold up there. But at the same time, it seems to be being priced a little too low for them to do something that's really excellent and really unique. Like, for instance, the Ritual here, which was a knife that had slightly higher end materials, etc. I feel like this is a case where they priced it a little higher and they ended up with something much better as a result. And so this kind of feels like something that's right in the middle there, right? They could have done this in such a way that it's like, yeah, it could be cheaper, but man, this is really good. So we end up with something that ends up feeling a little bit mediocre, right? It's an okay knife. It is miles away from being like a dangerously bad knife. It is safe, it is workable, and it's something, particularly somebody who is not a knife snob, who handles high-end and medium-end and low-end pocket knives all day long, could very easily use happily for the rest of their days, right? This is a fine knife in that particular regard. But it also does manage to feel a little bit disappointing, particularly when I know that CRKT can do so much better, right? You know, both in terms of the Ritual on the higher end. If they put it up a little bit higher, they might have been able to do something like this, where it's really, really good, and you pay that price. Or maybe they could have brought it lower and done something that's, you know, yeah, some of the materials aren't great, but the price is right. But they ended up in this really awkward middle piece. And as a result, a knife that I feel like has a lot of potential, as I feel a lot of John Graham's designs end up kind of as a miss, right? It's avoiding both being competitive for the price and excellent enough to be worth that money. And that's kind of just frustrating to me. I really, it always makes me a little bit sad when I see this happen, and it seems, unfortunately, to happen at CRKT a number of times. So I know that they can do it right. I don't get it. Like, well, what can we do? Can we go, like, take the accountants out to lunch when you have a product meeting? That way they're not in the room and they don't have to, I don't know. It's frustrating. So I guess my final conclusion here is, like, if you love the design, you don't mind the downsides, then you know what? This is going to be fine for you. It's a perfectly reasonable knife. It is safe. It is going to do everything that you need it to do. But I really hope that the next version of this ends up aiming either a little bit higher or ends up aiming a little bit lower and giving this design a better chance to shine. So anyways, there you go. Hope this has been interesting to you, and have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.